And good morning and welcome to Hot Seat. My pleasure this morning to have the House Minority Leader, Cyndi Munson. You've been on Your Vote Counts. You've recognized this audience and they recognize you. It's good to have you.
Good. Thank you
and
for
the
having
Minority Leader in the State Senate, Senator Kay Floyd. Good to have you, Senator.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, most of the time when you see a speech given in Oklahoma, it's being given by a Republican, right? After the legislature, they control both houses by big majorities. But Democrats ran Oklahoma for a very, very long time. And we have two women leaders who happen to be Democrats, who often take opposite sides of what we hear from the majority. So, Representative, we could start with you. You know what's going to be happening on Monday. You've heard the agendas of the leadership on both sides. What are your agenda? What is your agenda as leader in the State House?
Yeah, as we begin on Monday, we know that the governor will give his State of the State address, and I don't think there will be any surprises, same with his inauguration speech. It's clear that the governor and the state superintendent of public instruction are pretty focused on siphoning public dollars and putting those towards private school voucher programs, and that is something that House Democrats have and will continue to fight against. We're coming in also with 6 new members in the House Democratic Caucus. And so there's a ton of energy and excitement around standing up for our constituents and standing up for our public schools. And so you'll see us continue to talk about and fight against those types of things. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it really doesn't matter. When we were out knocking doors, we heard about inflation. We heard about costs being too high for families when it comes to their groceries, their rent, and just basic necessities, the things that we all need in order to live. And so we'll continue to push tax policy that we think will be good for working families, specifically cutting the state sales tax on groceries, and then looking at how we can expand the earned income tax credit. We've already done some work in 2020, good work around that, but there's still more that can be done. And then we have some legislation to address minimum wage and also sales tax relief credit. So that'll be a priority for us. And then, of course, pushing back against the extremism that we see happening at the national level, but it's seeping into what's happening at the local level. In states all across this country, we're fighting the same thing. Voucher programs, woke indoctrination in our schools, and then attacking people when it comes to their health care. We'll continue to stand up and fight for quality health care and access to health care regardless of who you are or where you live.
Representative Munson's working with a veteran leader and Speaker McCall. You're working with a veteran leader and Senator Treat, the pro tem. Senator, what is your agenda this year?
Well, you can't talk about agendas without first discussing the budget and how much money we have. This year was a $10.8 billion budget. That's an 8% increase from last year. We've seen what I consider and my caucus considers an unreasonable large amount of money that's been put in savings accounts. You've got $250 million in a PrEP account. You've got $698 million in what's called the LEAD account. Our rainy day fund right now is at $1.1 billion. We have money in savings accounts that we could be putting into education, we could be putting into health care. And that's what our agenda, part of our agenda is going to be as the Democrats in the Senate, is moving this money into areas that will help Oklahomans. We've got large learning gaps in education in Oklahoma from COVID. It's a nationwide problem, but the numbers in Oklahoma are much lower than the numbers nationally. We've had our 8th grade and 4th grade math proficiencies dropped more than the national average. Our 8th grade and 4th grade reading proficiencies dropped more than the national average. We could take some of the money out of savings and put it into programs that would increase the education outcomes in our state. Health is a very, very big issue. We've seen lower than national health outcomes. We're number 1 in the nation in death by heart disease. We're 24% of our women die in childbirth in Oklahoma. If you're a woman of color, that number goes up to 44%. We could be getting more money into our health outcomes, but instead we're seeing Republican bills that are being run. I think there's 14 or 15 of them that want to limit a physician's right to practice best practice medicine. So if you have a parent and their physician and they have come to a decision what's best for that child, the parent cannot make that decision. The parent will be outlawed for making the decision that they think is in the best interest, and the doctor can be penalized also. Education, we're seeing 14 to 15 bills that do nothing, Republican bills that do nothing except exasperate problems and cause hostility in our classrooms. We don't need that. So we're going to be focused on those two issues. We're going to be focused on robust economy. We have plenty of money. If we could take it out of the savings accounts and put it, not all of it, put it through the state, education, health care, criminal justice reform, issues that Oklahomans care about. And that's what we're going to focus on as a caucus.
If you were to look at, take Oklahoma County, for example, if you were the leaders and Oklahoma County was the state legislature, you'd be either in the majority or very close to it. All right, Oklahoma is really split. Tulsa, Oklahoma County, Cleveland County, very strong Democrat presence. But on the statewide aspect of it, you're in distinct minorities. How do you have an impact with your agenda and your agenda on getting things done and contributing to public policy in the state, Senator?
You know, my caucus doesn't look at it as a urban, rural, us against them situation. We really don't. I mean, we have opposed vouchers every time it comes up, and that disproportionately affects rural Oklahoma, and yet the majority of my caucus is, as you say, urban. But that doesn't matter to us because we know vouchers are bad for the state. It's a school killer. It is in the rural areas. But we understand that we're a statewide populace. I mean, we can't just focus on the urban areas. As a caucus, we have to think about the entire state. And sometimes, frankly, I don't know if our Republican colleagues do.
Yeah, education is a great topic or issue that we focus on, obviously, at the Capitol. And when it comes to voucher programs, you will see rural Republicans and urban Democrats link arms and come together and fight against these types of programs. And Secretary Walters was at the Capitol these last couple of weeks proposing his budget, talking about some of the plans that he has. And you saw Republicans and Democrats questioning him on what this program would look like and trying to be very honest with him on how it would kill their rural schools. And so that's one issue that I'm grateful that regardless of party or regardless of where we live, we sound the same. For us, education shouldn't be partisan. It should be something that we all care about and ensure. And quite frankly, it's required in the state constitution that we provide a quality public education for every student in this state. And so we'll continue to do that. And with healthcare, you know, in the urban areas, I'm very grateful. Even in my own district, my constituents can go right down the street and go to 2 or 3 major hospitals. That's not the case for rural Oklahomans. And that is an issue for those of us who represent urban areas, because when you have rural Oklahomans who cannot get the healthcare services that they need, that are critical, where do they go? They come to hospitals in urban Oklahoma. That's a burden on them because they have to travel and they can't get the health care they need down the road from where they live. But it's a burden on us too, because then our constituents and those of us who live in urban areas can't get access, or we're pushed out and when it's time to get the services that we need. And so it has to be a statewide focus, regardless of what area you represent.
And you know, if you look at the way the money was handled in the Rescue Act, you saw that there were urban legislators, there were rural legislators on these subcommittees that were formed and looked at all this money that was going out statewide. And there was a lot of focus on the rural areas because the need was very great. And you saw urban legislators, Representative Munson was on one of the subcommittees, I was on 2 of the subcommittees, and we didn't think of it in those terms because it was a statewide issue. COVID hit everybody. And so I'm hopeful that we've learned some lessons about how we handle the Rescue Act money, because it wasn't even bipartisan, it was almost nonpartisan. And we had to be very aware of the rural areas and how much money went to them because of the water issues that we have. You know, the grow farms in the panhandles, not to get too far out into the weeds, no pun intended, but just the amount of water that's used in the grow farms in the panhandle was a real concern that we had to address. And so some of the first projects that went through were to handle that issue, which was almost exclusively rural. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to learn some lessons from that nonpartisan ability to work together and get away, and hopefully the majority will be able to control some of its outliers, and we won't see all of these just hateful political bills like we're seeing now, 15 over here, 14 over here. You know, Oklahomans have real problems. They want real solutions. They don't want all this political theater.
When you're working with the majority leadership in both of the chambers, when you're talking to Speaker McCall and you're talking to Pro Tem Treat, when you have the conversations, do they listen to what you're talking about and the concerns that you have from urban areas? They also have large rural caucuses. So how well can you communicate with them? do you feel comfortable in communicating with leadership, the majority leadership?
Yeah, you know, Speaker McCall and I, for the entire time I've been in the legislature, he's always been very respectful and kind and open to concerns that I've had personally just as an individual member and then also our caucus. And now that I've moved into this particular leadership role, none of that has changed. In fact, he's become more open to listening what is on my mind and what's on the mind of our caucus. And the way that I tried to communicate the needs that we have, like you said, our caucus is mostly made up of urban members. His is mostly made up of rural members, but not all. He does have some urban members. And I tried to bring forth, and the conversations I've had with colleagues and then also just out in the public, is bringing it back to the economic impact of what's happening in our state. Most of the industry that's looking at coming to Oklahoma or that's growing is happening where? In Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We really need that to spread out into more rural areas or suburban areas so that everybody has some opportunity. And so that's how I tried to approach those conversations with the speaker and my Republican colleagues. Leader Floyd mentioned ARPA. I was on the Rural Development Working Group and Human Services, but my involvement in rural development it gave me great interest in what's happening in rural Oklahoma around infrastructure when it comes to water, broadband, and those types of things. And so I'm on the newly formed Rural Development Committee in the House. I'm one of 2 urban members, and I've even had members who in rural Oklahoma who have said, why are you on that committee? And it's because it's all intertwined. We're all connected. And so if I seek success in what's doing well here in Oklahoma City or Lawton, which is where I'm from, I want to see that spread across the state, and I want to be a voice for that. And so I think, going forward, that's how we'll continue to connect on the issues. And again, like Leader Floyd said, let's get away from these culture war, partisan, divisive issues that we have. I think for a long time, people have just sort of looked the other way. Oh, this has to happen. This is what goes on during session. Now it's becoming, it's overwhelmingly taking over the conversation at the Capitol, and it is harming our opportunities and economic growth in the metro areas and in rural areas of our state.
Senator Treat, Pro Tem Treat, and I have a good working relationship. We've served together for a lot of years, and I feel like that he listens to my concerns and not always follows my sage advice, but
yeah, he should.
But we have a very good working relationship, and I have a great deal of respect for him. I'd also have to say that the Appropriations Chair, Roger Thompson, and his Vice Chair, Chuck Hall, have both been very, very good to work with. And I think that, and I don't know if it was this way on the House side, but I think as far as ARPA is concerned, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but it honestly is the best example I can think of. In the 11 years I've been up there at the Capitol, it's the best example I can point to about nonpartisan or bipartisan working together. And working with Pro Tem Treat and Senator Hall and Senator Thompson, I think the relationship that we forged in that bipartisan, nonpartisan, is going to move forward, hopefully in the session. I am concerned about some of the bills that, as Leader Munson says, are sort of taking over the dialogue, taking over the discussion. You get some of the far right who, I'm not even sure what their motivation is some of the time. I don't believe it's in the best interest of the state. And I think that we need to get past that. We've got serious issues. We need to focus on those. But I think leadership is working well, at least as far as working with the Pro Tem. And by the way, I was in the House before I was in the Senate. I came in with Speaker McCall and John Eccles. We're three of the 6 members who came in 11 years ago, and the other members of my class have gone now. So I've been able to maintain a really nice relationship with the Speaker and with Eccles, and that's been very beneficial, working not only across the aisle, but chamber to chamber.
It's in the air. First Tom Brady, now Charles McCall and John Eccles retiring soon. Well, final thoughts. I want to ask you about your involvement, Heart Association, and some of our really bad outcomes health-wise in Oklahoma. But final thoughts in terms of as you start the first session of the 59th legislature, what you're hopeful about, Senator? I'll start with you.
Cooler heads will prevail. That we can take the serious issues and get some things done. That we won't try to interfere with parental rights, for the health care decisions for their children. That we will make sure that we fund education and get the learning gap taken care of. Get our scores back up. Not be focused on all this divisive arguments about education, but think about the kids for a while. Those are two of my hopes. I don't know if they'll come to pass or not, but I hope so.
Heart Association, Heart Health.
Heart health. Oklahoma is the #1 state in the union for death by heart disease. Number one, top 10, and it's an issue that I was approached about at a conference actually, and they gave me some statistics and they gave it state by state, and that's where I found out about Oklahoma. So I've done some PSAs and just want to make people aware that this month we need to be more aware of our hearts and try to get that #1 in the nation down. We need to be #1 in a lot of things, but heart disease death is not one of them.
Final thoughts before you run down the tunnel and out to the adoring crowd on Monday?
Yeah, well, we have some walkout music. Or, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of new, especially in the House Democratic Caucus. Of the 4 legislative leaders, I am the newest. And so I have a lot to learn. And I've, of course, admired Leader Floyd and the work that she's done both in the House and the Senate and how she's led her caucus. And so I'm very excited, and I mentioned earlier about the 6 new members. So we didn't lose a seat in this election cycle. We picked up a seat. We haven't done that in about 20 years. And I like to tell people since I was about a sophomore or junior in high school. So I'm riding high on the fact that we're coming in with some success. I'm looking forward to what our members will work on and how they'll build relationships, especially the new members, how they'll build relationships with the majority. You know, my goal as leader is to equip them with the tools that they need so they can be successful. We know the uphill battle that we're fighting. I've been very aware the entire time since I started running back in 2013 in my first race, all the way to now serving as minority leader. But I do believe there are always opportunities to have our voices heard and to push forward the priorities that are important to Democrats and, quite frankly, many Oklahomans across our state, regardless of party. And so my goal will be to continue to lead in that way and then bring some balance to the legislature. I won't be able to make a ton of change there in this session, but I think just going forward, you know, my vision really is to bring balance to the state legislature and look and sound a little more like the state of Oklahoma, so that way we can take care of things like education and healthcare and infrastructure and these things that are very important and exciting for people to work on. It's amazing what Republicans and Democrats can do together, again, when we get away from some of the more extreme ideas and measures that we end up voting on every session.
Senator Kay Floyd, Representative Cyndi Munson, Senate Minority Leader, House Minority Leader, first time. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching Hot Seat. See this again at news9.com/YourVoteCounts and follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.